Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Locker Room, our weekly podcast where we talk about sports on the Bayou. We celebrate all of our high school kids by taking a look back and forward as to what they have accomplished in the prior week and the week upcoming. Again, good to have you here. Stan Grava, along with Dustin Robichaux, who has been helping out in putting this together on a weekly basis. We enjoy everything he does. Hope you're having a great Christmas holiday season.
Yes, sir, Stan. Actually just was at my sister's wedding in North Carolina.
North Carolina. Is North Carolina cool and festive related to the holiday? I mean, was there a lot of holiday spirit there?
Absolutely. It's like a Hallmark town where she lives. Yeah.
I like that description. That's good because God knows if it's up to my wife, it's Hallmark. It's all Hallmark. You know, saying that, I had the opportunity, obviously, as a lot of people in the area did, to go to the state championship games, right?
Yes.
And of course, we were all following E.D. Whitenet. New Orleans has that feel right now.
Really?
Yeah, it's kind of nice, you know, when you're going around the dome and you're doing things. And then I did go to the Saints game yesterday, so was there That's the first time I'm in New Orleans really hanging out for an entire weekend. But it was festive, and I think everything was fun. Unfortunately, the Cardinals came up a little bit short, but I tell you, here in the community, we have so much to be proud of what they did and the way that those kids play ball. Really excited to be there. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, a very impressive season for those guys.
No doubt. And listen, I was there on behalf of radio also. Our local radio station, KDLC 97.7 FM, has been covering high school football all year long in the name of Terrebonne General. You know, they are the naming sponsor. So the last few weeks, I've been asked to go on and do color analyzation of the games, and I got the opportunity to do that. And I had a lot of fun. So I do want to thank that radio station, along with Hillary Domingue and Bobby Arsenault and Sean Dupre, who was there as our spotter. We were actually in the WWL booth, the WWL radio booth. So for you folks who know of Deuce McAllister and those guys who do the games there, we were in that booth and a lot of fun. Very proud of what E.D. White did in that game. Shaw is a school that is pretty much getting the entire West Bank to go to school there. And the Cardinals held their own. So, again, a lot of fun. And obviously, that's what we're going to talk about a lot on today's podcast when we get Casey on the state championship game. But what we're doing is we're putting a button on the fall season. That's it, folks. When you think of football, volleyball, swimming, cross country, it's done. I mean, it's amazing that we are at December 15th this quick. And that state championship game on Friday pretty much put the button on it for our area. So we're going to look back at that championship game, but we're going to look back at every team in football to specifically put a button on football. And I'm going to ask Casey a little bit later, what's his thoughts on the future of each of our programs in the Bayou region. So that's like 14 teams we're going to take a look at. And listen, from here on out, it's all basketball, soccer, and those sports that are happening in the winter. And for all of you people who have been joining in to our podcast on a weekly basis, thank you. The numbers have been good. You know, we've done this as an effort just to make sure that we promote, publicize, I'm not quite sure what the right words are to use, our Bayou region student athletes, not only on the high school level, but even younger than that. Some of them who are playing recreation ball, some of them who are playing middle ball. And again, the numbers have been pretty good, so we appreciate that. We always appreciate having Casey with us too. And we're started developing some more features to put in here. A lot of people have been asking, where are those kids in our area that have gone on to the college level? What have they done? Because we don't hear the news of them. The Mason Smith, who is playing at Jacksonville with the Jaguars. The Ja'Kai Douglas from Terrebonne High, who's playing with Florida State. Some of our basketball players who are actually playing on the West Coast. They're playing in the Los Angeles area. We're culminating all of that information, and hopefully on a weekly basis, we can let you know how some of our kids from the area are faring as they've gone out in the country. So that'll be a lot of fun for sure. But as I mentioned earlier, today's a show of buttoning up the football season. We're going to have Casey on, and he's going to talk to us about each of those programs and what we might see in the future. As we are so fortunate to have every Monday, Casey's here with us again, and it's a kind of special Monday simply because you had the big dome games going on this weekend. How are you, Casey? Everything going well?
Doing wonderful, man. Just fresh off of a very busy, fun-filled weekend. And as you were talking about a second ago before we hit record, almost Christmas time, brother. Santa Claus is on his way.
Yeah. That's kind of wild that we're sitting here on December 15th. I don't know where things have gone this entire year. But listen, we're fortunate that we have a local team that's in the dome. So, I'm going to start it off with that. Your thoughts on the performance of E.D. White against Shaw on Friday?
Kids played their hearts out. They did everything that they could do. They played so hard with so much effort, so much energy. It's funny. We had Kyle saying on play-by-play on Wednesday, and he said the two things that we have to do is we have to win special teams, and we can't put the ball on the ground. And ultimately, E.D. White has a field goal get blocked and a turnover deep in their own territory. So give credit to Coach. He had the game pegged. The Cardinals just didn't execute to the fullest of their ability. But I'll say this, it's the winningest senior group in the history of the school in terms of total number of wins. And it's a group that, as you mentioned last Monday, Stan, has a lot of players coming back. They're losing some guys at the lines of scrimmage. They're going to have to plug in some guys there. But skill guys will be back. Got a lot of linebackers and defensive backs back. This is a Cardinal team. Don't be surprised at this time next year we're talking about a lot of the same things with these kids because I think they're just getting started.
Yeah, talking to some of the assistant coaches after the game, they said the nice thing is we have a lot of undergraduates coming back at some of our skill positions. Bad thing is we're sort of getting wiped out on the offensive and defensive line related to seniors. So, we sort of see how that play out. A lot of times when you make it to the Dome, you're getting wiped out, period, right? I mean, it's not about necessarily a skill position or a line position, but you hit it on the head. And listen, just from the peripheral, just seeing the crowd that was there from E.D. White was pretty spectacular. Again, they did this a couple of years ago when they played over in Lafayette, but it was special, and those folks really supported their team, I think, in the right way. So kudos to all of the E.D. White community for what they did there. One of the assistant coaches told me when you play a Shaw, and I thought this sort of summed it up, said when you play a team like Shaw, you obviously can't have any huge mistakes. You might get away with a couple of minor mistakes. But he said, we had two that were like just glaring. And I said, okay, I think I know the two. Can you tell me what your two are? He said, well, right before the half, we had a busted coverage. And the young man, Jacob Washington, who is good, goes down there running by himself. And he said that was huge because quite honestly, we thought we should have been going in at half 14-7. And he said, and then the other was, we knew we were going to give up probably some big runs to the Parker kid. He said, so I didn't mind that he broke one. He said, but boy, that fumble late in the game.
Yeah.
When it made it a 2-score game was just too much to overcome. And we're not taking anything away from Shaw. Shaw's a good football team who certainly belong there. But boy, if E.D. White could have played that perfect game. But they're high school kids, I guess, so that's sort of the deal, right? You're not always going to play perfect, right?
Oh, 100%, man. You're not going to ever play, a 100% clean and perfect game. Heck, just look at the Saints, I guess, right? As an example for that. Even they don't put that together. But no, for the Cardinals, they did themselves proud. They had a wonderful season. And I really believe that the way that they do their scheduling now, where they really challenge themselves. They played the best of the best throughout the course of the year. And I think looking back in hindsight, Coach Lesang and his staff could say that was probably a pretty good move because they were battle-tested. Nothing that Shaw gave them was throwing them by surprise. They were good at the line of scrimmage. They were blocking well. Just a couple of things didn't go their way, and it allowed Shaw to get out of there with the state championship win.
Quickly, before we kind of do our State of the Union address on all of our programs in the area, there were other games that happened this weekend, some that had some type of relationship to us in the Bayou region. One of those, St. James, was right on our peripheral. We consider them a river team, but they had a chance on Thursday night against Sterlington, which must have been one heck of a game going back and forth. But the Wildcats come up a little short. Your thoughts related to St. James?
Well, they got a ninth grade quarterback. This was not supposed to be their year. This was their down year at St. James, and they made it to the state championship and lost in the finals. They're going to be A-OK going forward. Based on, we were talking to some of the folks during the preseason, and they were kind of telling us, hey, it is going to kind of be a quiet year for them, but that never materialized. Obviously, they played at a very high level. They went into the bracket as the number 1 seed. So, yeah, look out for them in the future. Came up just a smidge short, but I have no doubts that core group is going to be back there very, very shortly.
So Friday's games were all great. You know, we talked about E.D. White and Shaw. The next game, Catholic of New Iberia has to hold on to defeat Dunham. And then a game I know you had your eyes on simply because Coach Skanes was coaching that game with Cecilia. Cecilia has a nail biter in their finals too. I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about Friday, but also talk about the contrast between Friday and Saturday. Because anybody, and I did not stay around for the Saturday games, but anybody who did stay around for the Saturday games had to get their fill of popcorn and anything else because it was 2 boring games, right?
Right. So Friday was an incredible day, as you said. You know, all 3 games come down to the wire. They're all decided by 1 possession. They're all decided by 3 points. You know, and you mentioned Cecilia. There's no harder working human being on the planet than Dennis Skanes. That guy puts in so much time, does things for the right reasons, did an outstanding job at South Lafourche, gets a little closer to home, goes to Cecilia. I could not be happier for he nor his team there. They had gotten their hearts broken last year by Opelousas. Kind of a controversial thing because Opelousas had some stuff going on. Cecilia didn't like how that all went down. So for them to get back there as the 18th seed, and from my understanding, they're the only team in the history of the state of Louisiana to win every single playoff game outside of their home stadium during the course of the playoffs on the way to winning the state championship. Because remember, you used to alternate that home-away cycle thing. Now, they don't do that anymore. So Cecilia is the first team in history to win every single playoff game outside of their home campus. Unbelievable for them. And then, you know, Saturday, Ed and the car, my God. They're facing another undefeated team, and they just rolled, man. Coach Bryce Brown was saying, you know, hey, we wanted to establish ourselves as the best team in the state of Louisiana. Well, yeah, I think you might have done that. And then in the back end game, Stan, you know, Central Baton Rouge is such a great story. They had several of their key players get in a severe automobile accident at the beginning of the season. Including their star running back who didn't even get a chance to play into the quarterfinals. He was in like the ICU, almost lost his life.
Wow.
So they're a team of destiny, man. And that's a season. My radio partner, Mario Jerez, is the play-by-play guy for them. He's been telling me all year, like their season could literally be a movie, man. They almost lost some of their key kids. And to just kind of keep putting it together and go ahead and win the state championship. Unbelievable story. And man, they put it on Ruston, a Ruston team that came into the game heavily favored.
Yeah, that's the one that may have sort of blown my mind the most. I didn't think that can happen. I didn't think, because everybody was telling me how good Ruston was. Just to go back to Carr, we were joking after the game in a little text group I have. And one fellow who loves high school football, but he didn't realize Carr was sort of at that level, said, wow, what's up with Carr? And I said, well, they are the 3rd best team in the state of Louisiana. And he said, 3rd best. I said, well, you got LSU, then you got Tulane, then you got Carr, then you have the Saints at number 4, right? You know, so, Carr. And what's interesting about Carr is I understand they're getting everybody from the metro area, so that's going to be a long-lasting deal. And then in talking to some of the assistant coaches at Shaw, they're pleasantly surprised. Now, listen, they didn't go out and seeking these kids on the West Bank, but all of those great teams you used to hear about at John Ehret and at West Jeff, well, all of those kids are all going to Shaw now. So I think you're looking at some teams that you're going to see in the Dome maybe year in and year out. I did want to get sort of your State of the Union address related to high school football. We're putting a button on it this week. Next week, it's all about basketball, and we'll throw some soccer in there. But where our local teams stand, or at least in your opinion, where they stand related to their programs. I'll start off with 8-5A. I'll go from those teams that finished the highest in our local area to the lowest. You just tell me what you think. Ready? Here we go. Terrebonne High School.
Got to take the next step. You've made the playoffs now 2 years in a row. Last year, or 2 years ago, you were on the road. This year, you were at home. Have not yet been able to break through and win that playoff game and go on that playoff run. You have a lot of high-end college-level players coming back. you have to take the next step next year. You're in a good spot, but you have to take the next step.
Agree. As a matter of fact, I told Dustin, our producer, I said, I love this when Casey talks. After everything he's going to say, I'm just going to say, I agree, because I know I'm going to agree with you on just about all of these programs. And if I don't, I'll throw something in there. But let's go to a team that maybe surprised this year and was the second highest Bayou region team, HL Bourgeois.
Got to keep it rolling. You have built a good foundation there. You had a really good season. Now, this coming season, you're not going to be able to have the luxury of being the team that everyone is going to kind of take lightly and you can kind of surprise people. They're going to know who you are. Coach Washington and his crew have done a really good job there. Now, they are losing some key pieces, but if you replace those key pieces with some of the talent at Evergreen that you have coming up, you're going to be in good shape. Just keep the train on the right tracks and go forward, not backward. Because we saw this a couple years ago. They made the playoffs, took a couple steps back the next couple years. Now you made the playoffs again. Time to go forward.
Well, I'll throw this in about HL. It was a true cycle school this year. They had a cycle of seniors, and I hope that doesn't hurt them going forward. But we've seen schools now that just sort of reload. HL Bourgeois was in a cycle mode, so we got to see if they could kind of fill those positions for next year. Next, the team that I don't know how you answer this question, the Thibodeau High School.
A great unknown. I mean, you got to get some stability. You got to get somebody in there that's going to want to be invested. They had some internal issues all year last year, and it ultimately led to the decision being made in the middle of the season to let go of their head coach. Once they get a new guy into the program, you have some talent, man. You have a very young offensive skill group. Your quarterback will be back. A lot of your running backs and receivers will be back. They're similar to Edie White in that they lost some guys on the offense and defensive line. So if you could plug in place there, you'll be okay. But you got to get some stability. That's one of the things that Shane Trosclair tried to do at the back end of the season when he was the interim head coach, kind of build that family vibe. You could continue that. You've got a lot of key pieces there. But again, it's the great unknown until we know who they bring in as their head coach.
Again, agree. Central Lafourche.
Got to stay healthy, man. Central Lafourche is in a good spot. They only have a handful of seniors. They have a huge junior group, not a whole lot of seniors. So they have just about all of their key pieces back. The problem, Stan, is that they couldn't keep any of their key pieces on the field this year. I mean, they were ravaged by injuries. They had so many guys go down for really the second straight season. So for them, they're going to need to just get a little bit of injury luck. And if they keep their guys out there, they're going to be solid. But it's been 2 years running that they've struggled with the injury bug.
Yep. It seems like little strides each year, but they almost have to be bigger, going forward. All right, let's go to 8-4A. We talked about him a little bit. Highest finisher in our local area was E.D. White. Just to recap, your thoughts on E.D. White and the future of the Cardinals?
Got to build and rebuild your offense and defensive lines because you're losing a lot of guys there, and that is the bread and butter of any program, but especially an option-based program like such as theirs. I know they have a lot of kids that they're really excited about that are coming up, and now it's going to be time to put that great strength and conditioning program to work because you're going to have to get some guys ready to play. And then another thing, and this is something that, frankly, Assumption struggled with last year, is when you lose some guys, you got to get the kids to understand that you're not, 11-2 right now, whatever the record was. You're 0-0 again. You got to get them to understand that it is a new chapter, it's a new journey, and it is a new ride. And I think that that's one of the big challenges that E.D. White's going to have to encounter in the upcoming season.
I'm going to add something, just an appreciation thing for E.D. White, and it's not necessarily related to on the field, but it is about their program. I know how hard you work in covering the Tarpons on Friday night in radio. I mean, that's something. E.D. White over the last umpteen years, I say umpteen, 5, 6, 7 years, have had Mr. Bauer there, who has done a telecast of their games and done a tremendous job from a lot of people don't realize, they think this is a pseudo professional organization, and it's a family man who had a son there who was a senior. I remember being in Atlanta a couple of years ago for the playoffs and watching in on the game. So I just wanted to say the word is that he won't be doing it going forward, but maybe somebody will take it over, whatever the case may be. Just a shout out to him for doing that to keep that program sort of in the limelight of the EDY community.
100%. And I could tell you this about Mr. Bauer and those folks there. They are super supportive of myself and what we do. They have always, offered anytime I've seen them, hey, do you need any help with anything? So just a great, like you said, a family man, a guy who loves EDY, and as you said, has done a tremendous job with that over the last several years.
Yeah, appreciate everything that he has done for that program. I'm sure Kyle Lasang has appreciated it too very much. Let's move on. Vandebilt Catholic, quite honestly, as I was watching the Shaw EDY game right there in the middle of it, I thought to myself, that Vandebilt game could have been for the state championship game against EDY also, but you do lose some big pieces, right?
That's the thing, is now you got to kind of start it over again. You lose a big old senior group. Now, their junior varsity and freshman and middle school teams were very successful. You got some talented kids coming back, but you're going to have to be replacing a lot of guys at a lot of spots. And I really think that this is a big off season for them to get bigger, faster, stronger, and go ahead and put it back together. Now, look, if you want to be that type of great program, which they think that they're capable of being, that's just what you're going to go through. You're going to lose some kids. You're going to lose some talented seniors. Their baseball program had that, where they lost some seniors, came back and reloaded. Now it's time for football to do the same thing. And I think they're capable of doing it, but it is a big off season for them.
The word is, I hear they have some really good skill people coming up. Yeah. So that, we're going to see how that all pans out for them. Next school, South Lafourche. South Lafourche started to have some glimmers of positive things towards the end of the season.
Got to start playing better defense down the Bayou, man. Their offense moved the football really on everybody. Even Lutcher and EDY, they didn't finish drives against those teams, but they moved the football effectively. You got a lot of guys back on your offense. You got most of your offensive line back. You got your quarterback, running back, just about all your receivers back. You're going to be okay. You're going to be able to score some points. Now you got to be able to stop other teams from scoring points. Too many games in the 40s and the 50s and even the 60s in some respects. The Tarpons started to figure some things out at the end of the year with playing guys both ways, but not burning them out playing them both ways, right? So where they were able to keep a little more energy in the tank at the end of games, if they could continue to build on that, they'll be okay. Their offense is going to be very explosive. You've got to figure out ways to get off of the field.
Next group is one that you mentioned that maybe looked at their record from the prior year a little bit too much, Assumption High School. And I'm going to go ahead and say this. It's probably a little bit in the rumor mill. So I don't know if this is a fact or not, but it sounds like Will Broussard was maybe interested in the Thibodeau job. So if that is the case, whether he gets it or not, or let's say he doesn't, man, how do you go back to a school like, how does that dynamic work a little bit? So your thoughts on Assumption, because there was, again, spurts of Assumption being like, man, this team could be really good, and then it just didn't happen for them.
You mentioned it. It's consistency. Some weeks they were good, some weeks they weren't. And Will came on. I remember we were doing a rodeo show, and we had him on over the summer, and he said, hey, look, we've got to realize, like we talked about earlier, that we're 0-0 again, and that last year's stuff is not relevant to this year's stuff. And then we had him on again in the middle of the season, and we asked him point blank, have you guys handled that well? And he said, frankly, no, we haven't. And at times it's been a struggle. They were not consistent. They played a certain way some games and a certain way other games. And look at the back end of the season, they started playing good ball. They got in as I think the last team in the bracket, and then, challenged the number 5 or 6 seed in the opening round of the playoffs. But they've got to bring it every Friday. They're going to lose a lot of talent on their offensive line. They brought them all back last year. They're losing a lot of those kids, but some of the skill pieces will be returning. I know this, if it is Will that's going to be there next season, he is a very good coach. He's going to figure it out. But for Assumption, the key is going to be being consistent and bringing that Mustang effort every Friday night.
Yeah, they have a pretty good athletic base there in Assumption Parish. South Terrebonne.
For them, it's going to be an issue of you got to start to grow your numbers, man. You didn't have a whole lot of guys. And I know that Coach Babin was saying continually throughout the season, we have a small crew, but we like what we have. Well, the problem is that You can't afford injuries. You can't afford guys to cramp. You can't afford little things that happen whenever you don't have those numbers. So I saw a group that played hard, gave everything that they had. There just wasn't enough of them. They've got some young skill pieces there. I think that they need to recruit heavily the underclassmen groups, the 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade groups, get more bodies out there, and I think that they'll be okay. But last year, it was surprising to see a South Terrebonne team, you coached there, that didn't have, those 50 and 60 guys dressed out. It was a smaller group, and I think that they got to start adding a little bit more fat to the bone, so to speak, there.
Yeah, I think that's the only way when you're playing 4A football to go play a Lutcher. You can't have single A numbers. That just kind of doesn't work. In the same vein, Ellender Memorial, who doesn't have a coach right now, my understanding.
See, that's the thing, man. It's going to be difficult for them. You have a situation where you struggled last season. You did win 2 games, which is 2 more than you had won the previous season, but it's a difficult situation because, let's be honest, a lot of your talented kids in that area are making the decision to go and play for Covenant Christian Academy right now because they see, hey, East Side legend Jesse Turner, the head coach, they got great vibe over there. So it's going to be difficult for Ellender. The one thing that they're going to have to do, they have some skill guys. They got a pretty good quarterback. And that Ellender's always going to have some dudes, right? You got to be able to be good in the trenches. They were rough in the trenches this past season. And it doesn't matter what your quarterback and your receivers and running backs could do if they're getting sacked as soon as they get the ball. So they've got to figure out a way to try to develop some linemen there and just kind of start laying that foundation. Now, is going to be an interesting coaching search because I understand when Coach Haslett was hired, they didn't have a whole lot of interest. So I'm curious to see who's going to take that job and how they're going to choose to try to build that program.
Agree 100%. They'll think it'll be easy for them. And by the way, this is my probably 5-time-a-year rant that I'm going to give. A lot of these teams go play 7-on-7 in the summer and think they're great because they're good at 7-on-7 ball. And I'm sorry, that's not tackle football. If you are playing 7-on-7 ball during the fall to go to the dome, it's just a different situation. And you got to get good in the trenches, and I think you hit that right on the head. And finally, listen, the other school that just can't sort of get it together is Morgan City. Do you see a light there at all?
I would if they would have had their quarterback back, man. Because the Mancuso was really good. He was one of the better quarterbacks in the district. With him being gone, it's going to be tough because he was back there taking a beating every Friday night and just kept ticking. Defensively, they were not very sound this year. They gave up a lot of points, a lot of big explosive plays. The one thing that I think Coach Danos is going to want to do, and again, we had him on just before the season, he hadn't hired a defensive coordinator yet. So I know that he was having a hard time filling out his staff. Hopefully with an offseason, he could get more coaches in there, which could allow him to have a little more help. But from what I understand, he was kind of in a situation where he was juggling everything. And when you're a first-year head coach and you don't have the most talent and you're at a program you're trying to build, that's kind of a tough thing. So hopefully they can add some more coaches to the staff. You got to replace a really good one at quarterback. If you do that, though, you do have some talented receivers coming back. So Morgan City does have some players, but it's going to be hard to replace Mancuso, who was so explosive back there at quarterback.
And I understand they had a little internal problems, adversity that they had to get over. So, yeah, you got to get that kind of minutia out of the way. Moving down to 7-2A, our local school is Houma Christian. Unfortunately, Houma Christian plays in the district with the state champ, Catholic of New Iberia. Also a very good Lauraville team. Also a very good Franklin team. 2 years ago, Houma Christian was pretty good, but last year maybe just a little overpowered.
Yeah, they got beat up a little bit last year, man. They had some skill guys, struggled in the trenches, got down early, and really had a hard time recovering. The one thing I know is this: Coach Celestine and his staff work exceptionally hard. They're going to not be satisfied with what last season was. They're going to try to piece it together. The reality of the situation for Houma Christian School, Stan, and I don't mean to, sound like a pessimist here, but they're a very, very low-end 2A school in districts with very, very high-end 2A schools. And that gap of students is sometimes hard to overcome. So since they've made that jump to 2A, it's kind of been difficult on them in some respects. But I know this, Coach Celestine and his staff, excuse me, they're not going to panic. They're going to continue to work hard. And I do think they're going to be better next year. They were young this year, and you mentioned cycles a minute ago. They had a big senior group 2 years ago, so they were a little younger this year. Get them bigger, faster, stronger, come back. And I think it's going to be important for them to start the season strong. They had a cancellation game against Ellender during the storm week that I think would have been big for them. If they could have played that game, maybe won that game, built some confidence. So I think the start of next season is going to be very important for Houma Christian.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I think it would have been big for either team. Like,
right.
Houma Christian wins, it's big for them. If Ellender wins, it would have been big for them. Water under the bridge. Season's over.
Yep.
Can't go back there. Let's move down to our single-A district locally, CCA, who had one heck of a year, and by all accounts, it looks good for the future, right?
Oh, yes, sir. You got your quarterback back, the Trosclair kid. You got Lollins coming back at running back. You got one of the Carters back at receiver. God willing, how the knee injury heals. We'll check on that. They lose some beef up front. But I'll tell you this, man, like with CCA, they have a lot of like 7th and 8th and 9th grade kids that we don't know about yet that are really, really good, that are going to make an impact there. Like I know Jesse is extremely excited about his kid. Jesse Turner the third. Like he's excited about him. And they got a Blackman kid there that they're really excited about. And they have some pieces that we haven't yet heard of. And they think that they're kind of building into that E.D. White mold of they're going to just recycle new talent. They think that they're going to be a contender every year. And based on what I know about the kids coming up, it's kind of hard to argue. I think that they're going to be strong again. Will they be undefeated in the regular season strong? I don't know, but they're going to be very solid again.
You actually wrote about it. Jesse mentioned it was a standard that he's kind of holding. I call it culture. If your program has a culture, E.D. White obviously has a culture. CCA sort of developed a culture this year. I think Vandebilt's starting to develop a culture. I think a couple of schools have that little missing piece. You mentioned South Lafourche. I think if they had that defense, then you sort of have a culture because everybody respects BJ's offense and the way they play. And I think CCA sort of has that. The interesting thing is the one team that's always going to be either the roadblock for them or the catalyst for them is in their district, and that's Central Catholic, the last team we're going to talk about a little bit. And I think that rivalry took another step this year. I think those two teams are going to be going forward like hot rivals, right?
Oh, yes. You play one another twice during the season, week 10, and you meet them also in the playoffs. That rivalry was burning hot, and it's going to burn hot in basketball in the winter, and it's going to burn hot in baseball in the spring, and it's going to spin over into the next football cycle as well. The thing for Central Catholic of Morgan City is they have a tremendous quarterback. The problem is he's a senior, and that's Benjamin Case. So when you replace a guy who runs your offense, kind of leads your locker room as a runner, as a thrower, is going to be one of those old cliches that coaches like to say, well, there's not going to be any one guy who's going to replace him, and that's just the reality of the situation. Now, they got some backs, they got some receivers, they got some big boys up front, but it's going to be difficult because there's no one guy that they're going to be able to plug in plays that's going to do the things that Benjamin Case did. The one thing for Central Catholic, and this is something that really kind of bothered them this year, is that Coach Grogan made the decision to schedule awfully hard. They play some 5A schools, they play Riverside, and really by the end of the year, they were kind of beat up a little bit. Now, this is going to be the second year of that scheduling cycle. They're going to have to build their bodies up to be able to survive the grind because the folks at Central Catholic would tell you, by the time they got to the postseason, they were battle-tested. But they were also beat up. They were running out of linemen, and they had some different issues there. So they're going to have to better be able to survive the season this coming year.
Yeah, makes sense because they play like HL and Central Lafourche and 5A schools and the like. To wrap it up, two simple questions that I probably should have forewarned you, but one is the biggest surprise in high school football to you this year in the Bayou region, and the other is this is what I knew, and I knew it would happen, and it panned out in the Bayou region. So first, the biggest surprise related to the Bayou region football this year for you was?
HL Bourgeois making the playoffs. I didn't know that was going to happen after watching them in the spring and watching them over the summer. I knew they had some guys, but they got better as the year went on, and they really impressed me. And along the same line, and I guess HL Bourgeois is part of this, how the Bayou in our 5A district kind of didn't catch the river, but got closer to the river, right? I mean, you see Terrebonne beat Destrehan and some other teams, everybody was kind of beating up on East St. John. It was a down cycle for them. So I thought that even though the river's still ahead, we kind of closed the gap, got a little closer this year. Would love to see if that can continue.
Yeah, the other thing I'll throw in there is we got to hope that Destrehan's quarterback's hurt for most of the year. Because they obviously were a different team there at the end of the year. Okay, the one thing in the Bayou region you thought was going to happen, you expected it to happen, and it pretty much happened.
EDY was incredible. I knew that coming in. Kyle told me he thought it would be a special season. He told me that, hey, look, we're going to be able to throw the ball a little bit, which they were. Barbera was exceptional back there. He's going to be returning. So EDY's successes didn't take me by surprise. I'll say this, whenever I saw the bracket come out, knowing that University was very unlikely to play, I picked them to go to the Dome as soon as the bracket came out. So yeah, not any surprises there. And then I'll give you another one. I had a good feeling that Vandebilt was going to be real good too, because just knowing Coach Wallace, I didn't know a whole lot about him, but the first time that I talked to him, just hearing his vision, I was like, yeah, that dude's pretty sharp. And I had a good idea, knowing with Coleman there and some of the skill guys, that they would be solid. So those are a couple of the things that, and another one of the surprises for me, for CCA to go 10-0, that was a little bit of a surprise. I wasn't shocked that they were strong, but to go undefeated was a great accomplishment. So kind of backtracking, thinking about the last question, and then tying it into this one, ED White, we all understood that they were going to be really, really good.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And quite honestly, those are schools that are, we just mentioned it, they're sort of developing culture. Well, ED White has had it for a while, but CCA and Vandebilt sort of getting that together. Listen, we enjoy having you every Monday. Thank you for the time. For you folks out there who want to tune into Casey Moore, he's your daily go-to, right? With Bayou Sports, where you can go on Facebook, whether it be play-by-play at lunchtime every day, whether it be go on to the Coach's Corner on Saturday morning and hearing some coaching interviews. It's always good stuff. So thanks for that. Your week busy. Well, anything you want to share with us?
Yeah, we've got some basketball this week. We're doing a little middle school basketball this week, so tune into the network for that. We've got some high school at the back end. I'll be at South Lafourche and Destrehan on Friday. Tonight, I think I got Ellender at home. I don't remember the opponent. Ellender boys are playing at home tonight. Got them. I got some Nichols women's basketball Wednesday on ESPN Plus, also Sunday on ESPN Plus. So we're staying busy. Next week will be my week to kind of eat the Santa's cookies and do all the holiday stuff. But this week is still going to be really busy, and I encourage everybody to visit www.by-the-letter-U-sports.com.
Very good. Most people in our area know it, but we'll make sure to get that out to everybody as we do our podcast weekly. Thank you so much for everything. We hope you have a wonderful week as we do lead up to Christmas. And next week, it's basketball. So we're going to jump head first. And thanks for putting a button on football for us.
Can't wait, man. Always a pleasure.
It was so good to have Casey on. Of course, he adds so much to the show as he covers sports daily. Again, on a daily basis, jump out to Bayou Sports on Facebook. You can find out tons of information. Not only that, you could see a lot of games live, and we appreciate Casey for doing that and for being with us. Next week, basketball. We jump into it hot and heavy. We got good response on last week. By the way, if you didn't see last week's podcast and didn't get to go see those basketball coach giving us some of those personal favorites, you need to go back and look at it because it was really fun. A lot of those coaches had some interesting questions to who their childhood heroes were and who their inspirational teachers were. So that was a lot of fun too. Just go back, easy to do. And by the way, if you subscribe to our site, you're going to get a notification of when it drops, as the kids say. I know I keep doing that, but I don't, when it comes out, and that way you can keep up with everything. So again, we appreciate you having. We hope you're having a Christmas that is delightful as we are right there, folks. I mean, heck, next Wednesday is it. Can you believe that?
That's crazy. Year just flew by.
Exactly. It wasn't just the fall season. It was the year that flew by. So, yeah, and we are going to drop one on Monday. So, we'll have one for the Christmas
Yeah,
week.
I want to clarify. Last week, I misspoke. When you asked about Spotify, I said it was the same as YouTube to subscribe, but actually on Spotify, you follow. You become a follower. And so the wording is a little different. It's the same thing. You'll get our new episodes in your feed. They'll pop up on your Spotify account, but they use a different term. It's following. So become a follower on Spotify and a subscriber on YouTube.
So I learned something new. Listen, the difference is that if you have time to sit down and actually watch, look at us on YouTube, right? If you have time where you're in a car just to listen to the audio portion, you can go to Spotify and listen audio. That's why, listen, we have a lot of highlights while we're doing this. For example, during the ED White State Championship talk, we had some highlights back there, but if you're listening to this on Spotify, it does you no good. So we're trying to stick to a more audio-friendly version of all of this as we go forward. But again, if you do have the opportunity to see it on YouTube, do realize that you get some highlights in there, and we're very happy for that. Again, that's enough of your time. We hope you have a remaining of the week that is wonderful. Next week is Christmas. We'll be back on Monday. Hope you are too. Take care, everybody.